A chill wind whispered through the ancient oak surrounding Oakhaven Manor, a grand estate shrouded in forgotten lore. Arthur, a young man with a weary spirit and an empty wallet, clutched the crumpled job advertisement. Night watchman at Oakhaven Manor. The pay was surprisingly good, almost too good for a place that had stood empty for decades. He'd pictured quiet nights, perhaps a few dusty antiques to keep company. How wrong he was. His interview with Mr. Thorne, the manor's enigmatic owner, had been brief, almost unsettlingly so. Thorne, a gaunt man with eyes that seemed to hold ancient secrets, had barely glanced at Arthur's resume. Previous watchmen haven't lasted, he'd rasped, his voice like dry leaves skittering across cobblestones. The manor has certain peculiarities. He'd offered Arthur the keys, a faded map of the sprawling estate, and a curt instruction to report at the stroke of midnight. Arthur, desperate, had pushed aside his unease. He needed this job. The first night, the darkness swallowed him whole as he approached the looming silhouette of Oakhaven Manor. The old stone seemed to breathe, its very presence heavy with history. The grand gates groaned as he pushed them open, a metallic shriek that echoed in the oppressive silence. He found the small watchman's lodge tucked away behind an overgrown hedge. Inside, it was cramped and filled with archaic monitoring equipment, screens displaying grainy, distorted images of the manor's interior. As he settled into the creaking chair, a sudden draft rustled a stack of yellowed papers on the desk. They were old, handwritten notes, a list titled, "Rules for the Oakhaven Watchman." Arthur picked them up, his brow furrowing. These weren't security protocols. They were ominous warnings. Rule 1. Check the manor's eyes, but never gaze too long. The reflections hold forgotten whispers. He flipped through the camera feeds, the flickering images of empty hallways and silent ballrooms doing little to calm his nerves. The silence was unnerving, a living entity that pressed in on him. Then, a soft scraping sound from behind him. He spun around, heart hammering. Old Joseph, the manor's ancient caretaker, stood in the doorway, his face a web of wrinkles, a broom in his gnarled hands. Arthur hadn't heard him approach. "Didn't mean to startle you, young man," Joseph chuckled, a dry, papery sound. "You must be the new watchman." Arthur, still breathless, nodded. "I didn't know there was a caretaker here at night." Joseph's eyes, surprisingly sharp, met his. "There's always one of us, watching, waiting. Just make sure you heed the rules." He gestured to the crumpled papers in Arthur's hand. "These aren't Mr. Thorne's rules, mind you. These are the rules if you want to make it through the night." Arthur scoffed, a nervous laugh escaping him. "You're serious?" Joseph's smile vanished, replaced by a chilling solemnity. Deadly serious. The last few, they didn't heed, they didn't last. He turned, his silhouette fading into the shadows of the corridor. "Take care, young man. The manor has a way of knowing when you're afraid." Midnight struck, each chime of the grandfather clock in the distant main hall echoing like a death knell. Arthur began his first patrol. The manor was a labyrinth of darkened corridors, dust motes dancing in the faint light cast by his flashlight. The grand ballroom, once a place of joyous celebration, was now a silent tomb, filled with a collection of antique mannequins dressed in decaying finery. He scanned them, his beam lingering on a particularly gaunt figure in a tattered wedding gown. Then he saw it. A subtle shift. The wedding gown mannequin had moved, its head now tilted slightly, as if observing him. Arthur's blood ran cold. He tried to rationalize it. A trick of the light, perhaps. He averted his gaze, forcing himself to move on, but a faint dragging sound followed him. Scrape. Scrape. He spun around, his flashlight beam cutting through the oppressive darkness. The wedding gown mannequin stood in the middle of the hallway, closer now, its blank eyes fixed on him. Panic seized him. He remembered Joseph's warning, the rule about the mannequins. Never look directly at the mannequins after midnight. If they change position, leave the area immediately. But he had looked, and now it was following. He ran, the rhythmic scrape of the mannequin's movement gaining on him. He burst into a dusty, disused bathroom, slamming the heavy oak door shut, his breath ragged. He splashed cold water on his face, trying to clear his head, to convince himself it was just a hallucination. He looked into the mottled mirror, and there, in the reflection, behind him, a pale figure in a faded, old-fashioned dress stood silently. Her hair, long and dark, obscured her face. Arthur blinked. She was gone. He stumbled back, hitting the wall. Another rule broken. Avoid looking into the mirrors in the old washrooms. They hold the reflections of those who linger. The air grew heavy, thick with a cold, damp presence. He fled the bathroom, the lingering sensation of unseen eyes on his back. He had to get back to the watchman's lodge, to safety. As he hurried through another dimly lit corridor, a faint, almost imperceptible whisper drifted from a closed-off antique shop. It was unintelligible, like voices speaking underwater, or perhaps in reverse. If you hear someone talking inside an abandoned shop, do not listen. The whisper grew, becoming a cacophony of distorted murmurs. Arthur pressed his hands to his ears, rushing past the shop, refusing to look, refusing to listen. The sounds faded as he distanced himself, leaving him with a throbbing headache and a renewed sense of dread. Just as he thought he was safe, a haunting, childish giggle echoed from the direction of the old nursery. A chilling, melodic sound that seemed to float on the stagnant air. If you hear a child laughing from the play area, leave immediately. He glanced down the hallway. Through the gloom, he could just make out the decaying remnants of a forgotten playroom. A rusty, dilapidated carousel standing silent. But the laughter continued. Innocent, yet deeply unsettling. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the carousel began to turn, its painted horses creaking as they rose and fell. There was no power, no wind. Arthur turned and ran, the ghostly laughter pursuing him. He reached the lodge, slamming the door and fumbling with the lock. He collapsed into the chair, his body trembling. He glanced at his wristwatch. 11:30 p.m. His blood ran cold. He had started his shift after midnight. How could it be earlier? Rule 7 screamed in his mind. If you check the time, and it's earlier than the last time you looked, immediately return to the watchman's lodge. The Manor was playing games with time itself. The next few hours were an agonizing wait. He stayed glued to the monitors, watching the empty, silent rooms, the motionless mannequins, the still carousel. The air in the lodge felt heavy, electric with unseen tension. Then, a sharp rap on the door. Arthur jumped. His heart hammered against his ribs. He looked at the monitor displaying the hallway outside. Empty. The knock came again. 3 quick, insistent raps. "Hey, how's the night going, watchman? Still think the rules are funny?" It was Mr. Thorne's voice, clear and distinct, yet laced with an unnatural echo. Arthur checked the clock. 4:03 a.m. Rule 8. Lock the watchman's lodge door between 4:00 a.m. and 4:30 a.m., and do not open it for anyone. If they knock, they might not be the person you think they are. Check the cameras to confirm. He watched the empty hallway on the screen, his hand frozen on the locked door. The knocking persisted, growing louder, more frantic. "Come on, open up! I'll tell you what's really going on here." Thorne's voice, friendly but subtly wrong, clawed at his sanity. Arthur closed his eyes, forcing himself to breathe, to remember the rules. He wouldn't open the door. The knocking ceased. Silence, heavy and suffocating, filled the lodge. Arthur kept his gaze fixed on the monitor, and then, slowly, a figure began to coalesce in the empty hallway. It was Mr. Thorne, but his features were distorted, as if seen through rippling water, his grin too wide, too unsettling. He knocked again, his gaze fixed directly into the camera, directly at Arthur. Then, like smoke, he dissipated, leaving the hallway empty once more. The clock on Arthur's wrist clicked to 4:30 a.m. Whatever it had been, it was gone. A shaky breath escaped him. The oppressive weight in the air lifted, just a fraction. His muscles ached from the tension. He needed to move, to shake off the lingering dread. He decided on a short walk, just around the immediate vicinity of the lodge. The manor was still. The only sound, the faint hum of unseen electricity. As he rounded the corner, there he was. Old Joseph, the caretaker, leaning against the wall, his usual friendly smile in place. He seemed solid, real. "Rough night?" Joseph asked, his voice gentle. Arthur stammered, trying to explain the impossible, the mannequins, the voices, the shifting time. Joseph listened patiently, his eyes unwavering. "You followed the rules, didn't you?" he said, his smile widening mysteriously. "That's important. There's more going on here than you understand. Much more." Joseph turned and walked away, his footsteps eerily silent against the stone floor. "Wait!" Arthur called, desperation in his voice. "What do you mean, no escaping it?" Joseph didn't stop. He simply faded into the pre-dawn mist, leaving Arthur alone and bewildered. Then, a soft, muffled crying. It came from one of the old storage rooms, somewhere deeper in the manor. If you hear someone crying in a storage room, do not open the door. Arthur knew this rule. Every instinct screamed at him to run, to go back to the lodge and wait out the last hour of his shift. But the crying, though faint, held a strange, magnetic pull. What if someone was truly in distress? He crept closer, fighting his own fear. The sobbing grew louder, more distinct, yet still unnaturally hollow, like an old, broken recording. He stopped just outside the storage room, the faint cries echoing through the deserted corridor. He could feel a cold, damp presence emanating from within. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the doorknob. Suddenly the crying stopped. An unnerving silence descended. Then, on one of the small portable monitors he carried, a figure materialized in the hallway he had just left. A woman. Pale, with long dark hair covering her face. She was dressed in an outdated, tattered gown, her body hunched. She didn't walk. She floated, her feet barely skimming the stone floor. She drifted towards the storage room, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She paused directly in front of the door, as if waiting for him to open it. Arthur dropped the monitor, scrambling backwards. He squeezed his eyes shut, willing her to disappear. When he opened them, she was gone. But the crying had started again, directly behind him. He bolted, running blindly through the manor's endless corridors, the desperate wails of the woman chasing him. He burst back into the watchman's lodge, gasping for breath, his body shaking uncontrollably. He slammed and locked the door, collapsing into the chair. He glanced at the monitors. There she was. The pale, floating figure, her hair still obscuring her face, was moving directly towards the lodge. She glided with an unsettling, jerky motion, her silent presence suffocating the air around her. Every second she drew nearer, and Arthur felt his panic clawing at his throat. He clutched the crumpled list of rules, repeating to himself, "Don't open the door. Don't open the door, no matter what." The woman stopped outside the lodge. He could see her on the camera, a rigid, unmoving statue. Then the knocking began. Soft at first, a gentle tap, then louder, more forceful, until the very door rattled in its frame. His pulse thundered in his ears. She was inches away, her cold, heavy presence pressing against the wood. The knocking escalated, a violent, frenzied pounding. The door frame shook, Arthur clamped his hands over his ears, squeezing his eyes shut, trying to block out the terror. "Hey, open up! It's Mr. Thorne!" A familiar voice, his manager's. Arthur froze. He glanced at the clock. 6:01 a.m. Relief, pure and overwhelming, washed over him. But then, suspicion. Was it really him, or another trick? He checked the camera. The woman was gone. No sign of the pale figure. Just the empty hallway. "Everything okay in there, Mr. Watchman?" Thorne's voice called again, closer, concerned. "Open up. Your shift's over." Arthur hesitated, his hand hovering over the doorknob. He had survived. The clock showed it, but the night had shattered him. He had to be sure. He glanced at the monitor one last time. And there he was, Mr. Thorne, standing outside the door, looking exactly as he had that first afternoon. No distortion, no eerie grimace, just him. With a trembling hand, Arthur unlocked the door and pulled it open. Mr. Thorne's expression softened as he saw the fear etched on Arthur's face. "Rough night, huh?" he asked, his voice filled with genuine concern. Arthur nodded slowly, unable to speak, his mind still reeling. "Yeah, you could say that." Thorne frowned. "You all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." Arthur managed a bitter laugh. "Something like that." He didn't go into detail. He couldn't. It didn't seem real anymore. He was just glad it was over. He's glad. But one question gnawed at him. "What about old Joseph?" Arthur asked suddenly. "The caretaker? The one who works the night shift?" Mr. Thorne looked at him, puzzled. "What caretaker? There's no night caretaker here. No one works here at night except you." Arthur's mind reeled. The pieces didn't fit. If there was no caretaker, then who had given him the rules? And what were the things he had seen? He handed Mr. Thorne the keys, quit on the spot, and walked out of Oakhaven Manor without looking back. Whatever ancient, malevolent force lurked within its walls, he wasn't going to stick around to find out more. As he drove away, the weight of the night still heavy on his chest, he glanced in the rearview mirror. For a fleeting moment, in one of the manor's dusty, high windows, he saw a faint silhouette. It was Joseph, the old caretaker, waving. He still didn't know if Joseph had been a helper, a victim, or the orchestrator of his nightmare. And he never would.